Imagine the fear and heartbreak of a family whose child vanishes without a trace, leaving only questions that last for decades. For nearly 27 years, the disappearance of Jacob Wetterling haunted a nation. But what finally led to the long-awaited justice for this case? Stay tuned as we dive into one of the most agonizing cold cases in American history, and how, after years of anguish, answers finally came to light. Welcome to Chilling Fireside Stories, where I tell the darkest, most mysterious true crime and paranormal stories. Grab a warm drink, get comfortable by the fire, and join me as I explore the harrowing case of Jacob Wetterling's disappearance. A case that remained unsolved for almost 3 decades before the shocking truth came out. If you enjoy stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell icon to be notified of future uploads, and share this video to support the channel. Jacob Wetterling was an active and vibrant 11-year-old boy growing up in the small, tight-knit community of St. Joseph, Minnesota. He lived with his parents, Patty and Jerry Wetterling, and his 3 siblings, Amy, Trevor, and Carmen. The Wetterlings were a close family, known for being involved in the local community. Patty was a homemaker who later became an advocate for child safety, while Jerry worked as a chiropractor. Jacob was a friendly, well-liked kid who loved sports, particularly soccer, and enjoyed spending time with his friends and siblings. He attended North Junior High School in St. Cloud, where he excelled academically and participated in school activities. His friends described him as outgoing, curious, and always ready for an adventure. He loved riding his bike around the neighborhood and playing outside with his brother Trevor and their close group of friends. The Wetterlings lived in a safe, rural area, where it was common for children to walk or ride bikes to visit friends or go to the local store. The town of St. Joseph, with its quiet streets and supportive community, seemed like an ideal place for a family to raise children. On the night of October 22, 1989, Jacob Wetterling's abduction occurred during what seemed like a typical evening in the small town of St. Joseph, Minnesota. Jacob, his younger brother Trevor, and their friend Aaron Larson had planned a fun night together. Earlier in the evening, the boys had been playing video games at the Wetterling house, but they decided to head to a nearby Tom Thumb convenience store to rent a video and pick up some snacks. Since Jacob's parents weren't home, the boys asked permission from the Wetterlings' babysitter. After receiving approval, they set off on their bikes around 9 p.m., traveling along a familiar route through their peaceful neighborhood. It was a short, routine trip, less than a mile to the store, along a well-lit, quiet rural road. After picking up the video and snacks, the boys began their ride back home, filled with laughter and excitement. But as they pedaled along the darkened road, their innocent trip took a horrifying turn. About halfway home, a masked man suddenly emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. He had a gun and ordered the boys off their bikes. The abductor forced the boys into a nearby ditch and began asking their ages. After determining that Jacob was the oldest, he told Trevor and Aaron to run into the woods and not look back or else they would be shot. The boys did as they were told, sprinting in terror, expecting Jacob to follow. But when Trevor and Aaron looked back, Jacob was gone. Terrified, they ran all the way home and immediately alerted the babysitter, who called the Wetterlings and the police. Within hours, authorities had launched a massive search for Jacob. Helicopters, K-9 units, and hundreds of volunteers scoured the area, but there was no sign of him. Jacob Wetterling had vanished without a trace. After the frantic phone call to the police, law enforcement responded swiftly to the report of Jacob Wetterling's abduction. Officers arrived at the scene within minutes and began an immediate search of the surrounding area, hoping to find any trace of Jacob or the abductor. The initial search involved local police, sheriff's deputies, and nearby residents, all combing the dark countryside with flashlights. Despite their efforts, no immediate clues emerged. The 2 boys who had been with Jacob at the time of the abduction, Trevor Wetterling and Aaron Larson, provided crucial details to investigators. Aaron, who was Jacob's close friend, described the masked man as being tall, with a low, gruff voice, carrying a handgun. The assailant wore dark clothing and a stocking mask that obscured most of his face. He initially ordered the 3 boys to lie face down in a ditch and asked each of them their age. The abductor selected Jacob because he was the oldest and allowed Trevor and Aaron to flee. Aaron later recounted how, as they ran away, they looked back in hopes that Jacob would follow, but to their horror he never did. The terror and confusion in the boys' statements were evident, and their descriptions of the abductor became the foundation for police sketches. Within hours, the search for Jacob Wetterling became one of the largest manhunts in Minnesota's history. The FBI, Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and National Guard joined local police in the effort to find him. Search dogs, helicopters, and volunteer search parties flooded the town of St. Joseph and surrounding areas. The community was devastated and rallied around the Wetterling family, praying for Jacob's safe return. Police set up roadblocks and questioned anyone in the vicinity, but there were no significant sightings or leads. The boys had only seen the man briefly, and with his face mostly covered, identifying the suspect was extremely difficult. Investigators pursued every potential clue from reported sightings of Jacob to tips about strange individuals in the area, but nothing yielded results. The investigation quickly broadened, with officers interviewing hundreds of people in and around St. Joseph. A key early clue came from another incident that had occurred earlier that year in nearby Cold Spring, Minnesota. Authorities found a striking similarity between Jacob's abduction and the attempted abduction of another boy in that area, who had managed to escape. The boy described an assailant who also wore a mask and threatened him with a gun. This led investigators to suspect that the two cases were connected. Despite the similarities, police hit dead ends in both cases. Early police reports indicated that there were no tire tracks or physical evidence left at the scene of Jacob's abduction. The abductor had seemingly vanished without leaving behind any clues, making it one of the most frustrating and perplexing cases for investigators. In the days following Jacob's disappearance, his parents, Jerry and Patty Wetterling, were thrust into the public eye. They pleaded for Jacob's safe return and participated in numerous interviews, hoping to spread awareness about their son's case. Patty Wetterling, in particular, became a vocal advocate for missing children, eventually leading to her lifelong role as an advocate for child safety. The family remained hopeful, even as the days turned into weeks without any solid leads. Despite the overwhelming support from the community, law enforcement, and national media, the case began to cool as time passed, and Jacob's whereabouts remained unknown. Over the next several years, investigators followed every lead, including psychics, theories, and even confessions from people claiming responsibility for the abduction. Unfortunately, each one led to a dead end, and for decades, Jacob's fate remained a mystery until a breakthrough came in 2016. One of the first suspects was Danny Heinrich shortly after Jacob's abduction in 1989. Heinrich lived near the area where Jacob was taken, and he had a history of suspicious behavior. However, at the time, there wasn't enough evidence to charge him, and the investigation eventually went cold. Years later, in 2016, authorities were investigating child pornography and discovered Heinrich's connection to the case. During this investigation, they found evidence linking Heinrich to Jacob's abduction. In 2015, investigators matched Danny Heinrich's DNA to a sample taken from Jared Skirrell's clothing. Jared Skirrell was abducted and sexually assaulted by Heinrich in January 1989, just months before Jacob Wetterling's abduction. This DNA match provided crucial evidence that led to a renewed investigation into Heinrich, ultimately resulting in his confession and conviction. It's a chilling reminder of how forensic science can play a pivotal role in solving cold cases and bringing justice to victims and their families. Heinrich could not be arrested and charged with that crime, but a search warrant was issued and child pornography was found in Heinrich's house, leading to his arrest on October 28, 2015. This renewed interest led to Heinrich being charged with child pornography, and as part of a plea deal, he agreed to provide information about Jacob's case. On September 6, 2016, Danny Heinrich appeared in court to change his plea to guilty on the child pornography charges. During the court proceedings, Heinrich was placed under oath and gave a detailed confession to the abduction, sexual assault, and murder of Jacob Wetterling. He admitted that on October 22, 1989, He had abducted Jacob near his home in St. Joseph, Minnesota, and subsequently sexually assaulted and murdered him. Heinrich's confession was part of a plea agreement where he received a 20-year sentence for the child pornography charges in exchange for his cooperation and truthful account of what happened to Jacob. This confession brought closure to a case that had remained unsolved for nearly 27 years and provided some measure of justice for Jacob's family. Heinrich led investigators to a burial site. Jacob's clothing and human remains were unearthed from a pasture near Painesville, about 30 miles away from the Wetterling home and the abduction site and a short distance from where Heinrich was living in 1989. On September 3, the remains were confirmed through dental records to be Jacob's. Although Heinrich could be released in 17 years from the start of his prison sentence, the judge told him that it was unlikely, as his crime is so heinous, so brutal and awful that it is unlikely society will ever let him go free. Following the discovery of Jacob's remains and the conclusion of the investigation, the Wetterling family, particularly his mother, Patty Wetterling, remained a beacon of resilience and advocacy. Throughout the years, Patty had become a well-known figure in the fight for child safety, founding the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center and pushing for nationwide reforms in how missing child cases are handled. In response to Jacob's murder, the Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children and Sexually Violent Offender Registration Act was passed in 1994, mandating that states create registries for sex offenders and violent predators. This was a significant turning point in child protection laws, and the Wetterling family played a critical role in advocating for these changes. Patty continued to speak at events and promote the message of hope and safety for children, even after the devastating confirmation of her son's fate. In the wake of the 2016 revelations, Patty expressed both gratitude and sorrow. She thanked the investigators for finally bringing answers and closure, but she also shared her deep grief and heartbreak at the loss of her son. "Our hearts are broken. We love you, Jacob. We will continue to fight for children in your name. Your legacy will live on," Patty said in a public statement shortly after the discovery. The Wetterling family has turned their personal tragedy into a lifelong mission to protect children and ensure that other families do not endure the same heartache. If you or someone you know has been affected by child abduction or is in need of support, there are organizations dedicated to helping families navigate this difficult and traumatic experience. The Jacob Wetterling Resource Center provides resources, support and advocacy for missing children and their families. You can find the link in the description, along with information on how you can support efforts to prevent child abduction and exploitation. Let's keep Jacob's memory alive by continuing the fight to protect all children.